I'm Will Deringer. I'm a second-year fellow in the Society of Fellows in the Humanities at Columbia University. I'm also a lecturer in the history department. So I work on the history of calculation. Particularly, I work on the history of economic and political calculations. I spend a lot of time in my work kind of thinking about the question of values. Values as something that you can calculate. You can calculate what a stock is, or what the value of a stock is. What the value of some new tax proposal is to the government, and so forth. And values in terms of our cultural and moral values. I received my PhD from Princeton in history of science in 2012. Before I started as a graduate student at Princeton, I worked as an investment banker in financial restructuring, in financial advice for distressed companies. The sorts of ideas and beliefs that lay behind various financial practices feed into both the way the system works, the fragility of the financial system, and also into how we understand the ethics of finance, both when things are going well and when things are going poorly. There are endless calculations that kind of exist behind many of the sorts of economic and political decisions that are made all around us, from the kind of very mundane to the most grandiose political decisions about the national debt, about tax policy, and so forth. And I'm also interested in the sort of broader question of how did it come to be that technical calculations, difficult mathematical calculations that by and large most of us don't really understand, have come to become such a central part of how major political decisions are made in the modern world. Those sorts of calculations, which seem in some ways like technical problems, are related very deeply to our moral understanding of fairness, how we think about what we should permit people to do in terms of financial actions. I'm working on two main projects right now. The first is under the working title, Calculated Values, Financial Politics and the Quantitative Age. And that looks at the 17th century, particularly in Britain, and tries to get at when did calculation, particularly calculation about economic problems, come to be a central part of how political decisions are made. The second project I'm working on actually takes a somewhat different approach to the history of calculation, and it's a long history of one calculation, present value. And it basically asks, how do you put a price today on something that's going to happen in the future? It comes up in the valuation of financial objects like bonds, and it comes up in abstract questions like how do we project the current cost of future climate change? What is it worth to us today if Florida is going to fall into the ocean in 500 years? The Society of Fellows provides a 3-year fellowship with all of the access to the resources at Columbia University. We participate regularly in events and seminars and talks. We also are teachers in the university. So in fall 2013, I've designed a new course on the history of finance, which is an attempt to understand the development of finance from its very earliest beginnings all the way to the present. So we cover about 800 years in 25 sessions or something like that. So I sort of pitched the course as a course that would be new and hopefully something jarring to teach students, whether they wanted to work on Wall Street or whether they wanted to occupy Wall Street. Financiers throughout history have long justified finance as an activity by explaining that it is a kind of technology that helps people to overcome economic obstacles, improve prosperity for everyone. But the question of whether that actually happens across different social groups remains sort of an open question. And that's one of the things that we're really kind of interested in talking about in my course.